While we can create charts and graphs rather quickly in Illustrator, there are a few little things we can do to prepare those graphics for animation. So as you can see, we have a graph here that's been created inside of Illustrator, but it's not ready for animation. I want to clean things up a little bit, maybe change the typeface, make these axes lines a little darker. You get the idea. In order to see things more clearly, I want to go to my tool palette here on the left-hand side and select the Artboard tool. Then go up to the top part of the interface and deselect the center mark, crosshairs, and video safe areas. Then let's go back and grab our selection tool. Now with the selection tool active, we can just click on any part of the graph to select absolutely everything. With everything selected, I can come up and click on the word character here in the top of my toolbar. And let's click on the pull down and change the typeface. I want to change it from Myriad to, let's say, Arial. Perfect. I can click on character to close that one more time. Now let's work on breaking things up so we can better size each of these different elements. If we go to the lower right corner of the interface, you want to click on the button for Layers to open your Layers panel. Now, if your interface doesn't look like this, make sure you're in the Essentials workspace and reset your essentials if it still doesn't look quite right. So here in the graph panel, if I go ahead and expand that layer, you can see with the word graph here, it's got these alligator brackets, and that's letting us know that this is grouped. So let's click on this inner graph and click on the selection circle on the right side and go up under Object and choose Ungroup. This is going to tell us that we can no longer make any changes to the data for our graph, and that's fine. I'll go ahead and click OK, and now each of the different elements has been expanded onto its own layer. So if we just click through each of these layers, we could go to the left side and toggle the visibility of each of the different layers on and off to figure out exactly what's what. So here, if I toggle the visibility of my topmost sublayer here, those are my dates. So I'll double click on that and say dates. Let's keep going through and labeling things. So this is the key. Not sure what this group is. I'll just leave that off for now. Lines, let's go to this one. We'll call that inches because this is measured in inches. And then, all right, so we have our baseline and let's see here. Yeah, there are inches. Let's move both of these onto one layer. So here, I'm just going to go ahead and make a new layer up here at the top, and I'll select my inches and my baseline, and I'll just drag and drop those up to this new layer. So now I can toggle the visibility off and on, and we can see this is the X and Y for our graph. So I'll say X underscore Y. Okay. So it's our baseline and measurement for each of the different sections. We can go ahead and drag and drop our dates up here as well. Now we can see this a little more clearly. Now I would like to thicken up the baseline or the X and Y lines. So I'm going to open this up one more time and I'll select my inches here. And notice it has both the text as well as the lines selected. So just so each of the lines are on their own separate things, I'm going to open up the options for inches here. And I just want to click through and, okay, those are the horizontal lines and this is the vertical line. And then these are the actual measurements. So let's move those measurements up to the dates. And I'll just turn this off and I'll call this XY underscore text. There we go. And then here, I can collapse my inches and I'll just drag those right down onto the baseline. And then we'll just call this XY. Okay, so let's go ahead and select the selection for our XY here. And then we can go up to our stroke and let's bump it up to something like 3. So when we deselect, you can see it's a little more thick. And this is exactly what I wanted. Now let's resize our key. I'm just going to go up and instead of using my black selection tool, I'll press A to grab my white direct selection tool. Then we can click and hold down Shift and click through each one of the different elements to make sure they're all selected. And I'll go grab my free transform tool and just hover over a corner and I'll press Shift and Alt to scale around the center point, or Shift and Option on the Mac. Once it's scaled down, I'll just drag it up to the upper right corner to go ahead and put it in a better place. Now I'll just grab my selection tool one more time. And while this looks pretty good, there's one other thing I want to do, and that's just change the width of each one of these different elements. Now notice the second I click on any one of these lines, it's going to go ahead and select all of them. So let's go ahead and collapse both layers, and I'll toggle the visibility of our graph layer off and on. If I expand the options for my graph here, you can see I have my key and I have my actual lines. And notice these upper lines are sadly grouped in with these other lines. So I want to go ahead and expand the options for lines here, and I want to see if I can separate out just these two elements. And a quick way to do this is to grab my direct selection tool and just click on one and shift click on the other, and then press Command X to cut that. Then if we actually select the key layer, I can go up under Edit and choose Paste in Place. Now those two elements have been pasted in place, and they're not directly on the key layer, so I can just drag the path right onto the key layer. And now if I turn that off and on, the entire key is on one layer. Okay, so for our lines, what I want to do is actually have each of these lines on their own separate layer for both the black and the white. Notice if I try and expand those options here, yes, I have sublayers, but it takes a lot of drilling down to actually get to each individual line. So what I want to do is just click on this layer and drag it up to the top of the hierarchy. But notice when I do that, if I try and place it between my XY layer and my graph layer, I can't do that. What I need to do is select the word lines and then grab my selection circle here, go to the flyout menu and say Release to Layer Sequence. That puts each of these onto their own layer. So now if I just click on one and shift click on the other, I can easily move them just underneath the XY and just above the graph layers. So now if I toggle the visibility of layer 5, I can rename this black, and layer 6, I can double click and rename this white. Now, in order to scale these around their center axis point, I'll go ahead and just click on one element. And then what I want to do is open up my transform options here, and I'll unlock my constrain proportions. Now I can change my width to 65, and when I press return, it's going to be nice and narrow. Now, rather than having to do that over and over again, I can just click on one element, go up to Object, Transform, and just press Transform again, or Command D on the Mac, or Control D on Windows. So quickly I can just select one and just Command or Control D and click through each of the different other objects. And there's very little repositioning I have to do as long as I just go object by object. So I have a little bit of space here between my vertical measurements and my graph, but just to space it out a little more, I'm going to go ahead and just click on each of the black boxes, holding down Shift as I select each of them, because I want them all to move in unison closer to the white lines. So I'll just use my right arrow key to move a little closer. And then when we deselect, now they're more tightly grouped in twos, and we have proper spacing between the different axes. So this looks like something that I can take into After Effects for animation. So now all I have to do is go up under File, and this time I want to save it. But rather than just saving it as another exercise file, I want to save it to my Assets folder, and I'll create a new folder in here called O3_AI. Now, you guys probably already have that folder, so you don't have to do this part. Just make sure you've selected the O3AI folder, and in here, I'm going to go ahead and save my chart, and I'll call this snowfall_AE.AI. And this way I know this is the file that I'm actually going to have imported into my After Effects project. So you'll probably already see this file saved in the AI folder. If you want to replace it, you can, or you can just use the one I've already saved there for you. I'm going to go ahead and save this, and now it's saved in that folder. So we've successfully optimized our layered Illustrator document. making sure that anything we want to animate is on its own separate layer. And we also made sure that they were grouped in groups that actually kind of made some sort of sense.